So your history teacher told you about George Washington crossing the Delaware and the French Revolution being about liberty and equality, right?
Cool, but did they mention that most peasants literally never left their village? Or that public executions were basically medieval Disneyland?
Fact 1. The average person in history never traveled more than 30 to 50 miles from where they were born. Ever. Think about that.
You probably drive farther than that for a weekend trip. But for most of human history, the village or town you were born in,
That was your entire world, your whole life. You'd hear stories about the big city 2 days away, but you'd probably never see it.
Your grandparents hadn't seen it, your kids wouldn't see it either. The idea of just hopping on a plane or even a train to visit another country, that would have sounded like absolute science fiction.
Suddenly, those small-town mindsets and historical documents make a lot more sense, right?
Fact 2. Most wars didn't start because of grand ideologies or national interests. They started because some king was having a bad day.
The War of Jenkins' Ear literally started because a Spanish captain cut off a British sailor's ear, and Britain decided that was worth going to war over.
the War of the Bucket? A stolen bucket, an actual bucket, between two Italian city-states? Thousands died over a bucket.
Sure, history teachers love to talk about how World War I was about alliances and imperialism, but it was triggered because a teenager shot an archduke because his sandwich was delayed. I'm not even joking. So next time someone glorifies historical warfare, remember, incredibly expensive and deadly tantrums.
Fact 3. Even in supposedly advanced countries, most people couldn't read. Like, at all. In 1800s America, land of the free, home of democracy, the literacy rate was maybe 60%.
And that's being generous. This means that when you see those beautiful historical documents, declarations, constitutions, 90% of the population couldn't read them.
They had no idea what was in them. They had to trust whoever read it out loud. Your entire understanding of laws, religion, news, and politics came from whoever had the power to read and interpret. And you just had to believe them. Imagine trying to participate in democracy when you literally can't read the ballot.
Knowledge wasn't just power. Reading was power.
Fact 4. Children could be legally sold into servitude, and society thought this was perfectly fine. I'm not talking about ancient civilizations. I'm talking about Europe and America in the 18 and 1900s.
Parents could literally apprentice their kids, which often meant selling them to factories, farms, or workshops until they turned 21. These kids had zero rights. They couldn't leave. They weren't paid or barely paid, and if they ran away, they could be hunted down and returned like escaped property.
Orphanages would basically auction kids off to whoever needed labor. Mill owners, chimney sweeps, coal mines, they'd take children as young as 5 or 6. And society didn't see this as a problem. It was considered good for the economy. Fact 5. Laws existed. They just didn't apply to wealthy people. You know how today we complain about the justice system favoring the rich? Well, in the past, it wasn't even subtle.
It was literally written into law. In medieval Europe, nobles could commit murder and pay a fine. Peasants would be executed for stealing bread.
Benefit of clergy meant that anyone who could read Latin, which meant educated, wealthy people, could claim immunity from secular courts. You could literally get away with murder by reciting a Bible verse in Latin.
In colonial America, wealthy landowners wrote the laws. Guess who those laws protected? Shock and surprise, it was wealthy landowners. Justice wasn't blind. She was checking your bank account.
Fact 6. Most historical heroes were absolutely terrible people in their personal lives. Thomas Jefferson wrote all men are created equal while owning over 600 enslaved people. He never freed them, even in his will.
Gandhi called black South Africans savages and Kafirs in his early writings. Winston Churchill diverted food from Bengal during a famine, causing 3 million deaths. Columbus wasn't a brave explorer. He enslaved and brutalized indigenous people for gold.
Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't understand history without understanding that humans are complicated. People can do great things and terrible things, often at the same time. But textbooks prefer simple stories. Heroes and villains, good guys and bad guys. Reality? Way messier.
Fact 7. People genuinely, truly believed that kings were chosen by God, not metaphorically, literally.
If you lived in medieval Europe and someone said, "Hey, maybe the king isn't divinely appointed," people would look at you like you just said the earth was flat and gravity was optional. It wasn't a political opinion, it was a fact of reality. Kings could cure diseases by touching you. Seriously, people lined up for the royal touch, believing it would heal them because the king had God's power flowing through him.
When a king was a terrible ruler, and many were, people didn't think, maybe we should change systems. They thought, God is testing us. The idea that a government gets its authority from the people, not from God, that would have gotten you executed for most of history.
Fact 8. Before modern journalism, news was basically a game of telephone mixed with wild speculation and total lies.
No fact-checking, no sources, no accountability. Just some guy who heard from another guy who heard from a traveling merchant who maybe saw something 3 towns over. And this is how people made decisions about everything. Wars, politics, medicine, who to trust, who to fear. Rumors about witches could get you executed. Gossip about your neighbor could ruin their life. Newspapers eventually became a thing, but even then, they were basically propaganda machines for whoever paid for them. Objectivity in journalism, that's a shockingly modern concept. Fact 9. A 12 to 14-hour workday was completely normal for everyone, including children. We're not talking about teenagers with part-time jobs.
We're talking about 7-year-olds working in factories, mines, and fields from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. There was no weekend. The weekend is an invention of labor unions in the late 1800s. Before that, you worked when there was light. You stopped when there wasn't. Children in textile mills would work 14-hour shifts. If they fell asleep, they'd be beaten or splashed with cold water. If they got injured, which happened constantly, they'd be fired. The 40-hour workweek, overtime pay, child labor laws, people fought and died for these. Fact 10. Public executions were family entertainment. People brought their kids. They sold snacks. It was basically a festival. When someone was executed in medieval Europe or colonial America, it wasn't a somber, private affair. It was a show, the main event, better than the circus. Tens of thousands of people would gather. Street vendors would sell food and drinks. People would rent out windows overlooking the execution site for better views. They'd make a whole day of it. Pack a lunch, bring the children. In France, during the Reign of Terror, guillotine executions were so popular that people complained about the wait times. There were regulars who showed up to every single execution. Fact 11. Historical records were constantly edited, rewritten, and completely fabricated by whoever won. You know that saying, history is written by the victors? It's not a metaphor. It's literally what happened. Losing a war meant your records got destroyed or edited. The Spanish Inquisition destroyed countless Aztec and Mayan texts because they were pagan. We'll never know what knowledge was lost. Chinese emperors would order entire histories rewritten to make their dynasty look good.
Even in America, the lost cause narrative after the Civil War completely rewrote Southern history.
And fact 12, most traditions you think are ancient were actually invented within the last 100 to 200 years.
Kilts as Scottish national dress? Invented by an English industrialist in the 1730s to make clothing his workers more efficiently. White wedding dresses? Queen Victoria in 1840. The traditional Christmas we celebrate? Most of it was invented in the Victorian era.
So there you have it, 12 uncomfortable truths about history that your textbook glossed over. Thanks for watching, and remember, question everything, especially the stuff they taught you in school.